Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip and Michael. Let's take a look at some of the newspapers. So we've got Claire Pearsall back with us. Welcome back. And we've got Nigel, who's back with us too. Nigel, what do you... Let's move away from the by-election for a moment, shall we?
Yes.
What would you like to tell us?
I think the Daily Mail front page is particularly good today. This is David Neil, who was fired by the Home Secretary for revealing that our borders are basically wide open. And now, at last, that the various reports that he had that were being sat on are now coming out. So it puts some flesh on what he's already said, and he's talking about the fact that passport checkpoints were left unmanned, X-ray equipment to try and find migrants in the back of the lorries didn't work, and even when sort of immigration teams went out to try and find people, illegal immigrants, they had to rely on Google Maps to go and do it. The key recommendation he comes up with, which is the one that the Home Secretary should take seriously, is that he's saying basically Border Force is not up to the job, civil servants shouldn't be in charge of our borders. He is saying that this should be the job for a professional law enforcement agency. Not clear whether that means setting up a completely new one or whether he wants to use something existing. But his point seems to be we've got too many holes in the system. And regardless of what you think about immigration, I mean, clearly we do need to protect our borders.
I mean, this is very interesting. Mr. Neil was fired apparently after he said publicly that our airfields were wide open to immigrants coming in, illegal immigrants coming in on private planes. But then he referred to the fact that 15 of his reports had been unpublished. He was fired. It was inconvenient what he was saying for the government. But still these reports have come out. And, I mean, these reports do make almost tragic reading, don't they? I mean, a real catalogue of incompetence.
Yeah, and presumably that's why they were being sat on in the Home Office, because it was. People didn't want this stuff to come out. I mean, Claire worked in the Home Office in immigration and saw very similar kind of things. I mean, it just seems to me that the Home Office is too big. It needs to be broken up. It probably needs to have a separate department or the government needs a separate department for immigration because it's now such a big issue.
But the thing, if I had to give a one-word answer, what is missing in Britain? Leadership. And that's the point he's on. There is no leadership in an agency like this. You know, there's the so-called management. There are structures and bureaucracies and HR departments, but no leadership.
Well, you could actually say that about politics overall. I mean,
you were from it.
Well, I'm saying it very, very broadly.
Claire, are you surprised by this then? As Nigel said, working in the Home Office, I mean, more holes in this system than a colander, by the sounds of it.
Absolutely, and it was quite interesting that these 13 reports have been sort of dumped onto the Home Office website yesterday, hoping to bury this news somewhere along the line. But unfortunately, the findings are incredibly damning, and I did see that when I started at the Home Office. On my desk was a pile of reports from independent Border Force person who was in charge at the time. It wasn't David Neil, it was another gentleman. But they hadn't been read, they hadn't been assessed, and were just sort of left there, and nobody had taken responsibility. So they had to be cleared. And I find one of the findings, the culture of defensiveness within the Home Office, that officials are putting themselves up against policy, they're not doing it, they're not going out and talking to people, and they're hiding behind their desks or working from home, in fact, to avoid going out and seeing for themselves what is happening. Now, that is appalling.
Is part of the issue because it's understaffed?
No, I don't think it is. I think this is down to leadership. This is down to not being challenged. This is down to not having a manager, if you like, as a Home Secretary, who is going to say this is the will of the government and this is what we want to do. Now, the officials are there to provide you with information, the information that you ask for. They are not there to put their own political spin or their own personal beliefs upon that.
And while we're talking about dreadful failures by the British state, you have another story here which is about the dreadful policeman who was a murderer and rapist.
Now, this is a gentleman who should never have been a police officer.
He's not a gentleman.
He is not a gentleman. I'm being kind. I don't wish to utter his name.
His name is Cousins.
It is, and I really don't like to mention his name because I think that gives him some kind of credence in society where he shouldn't have it. The murder of Sarah Everard was appalling. The failures of the police vetting service in the first place. This was not something that should have been left unchecked. They had red flags.
He had a pattern of behaviour and criminality stretching over 20 years, which was not picked up by 3 different police forces.
That's right. I mean, Kent Police, and I live in the great county of Kent, and Kent Police had said that he shouldn't be suitable, but that information was never acted upon, and he seemed to have gone from that to parliamentary and diplomatic protection within the House of Commons as part of the Metropolitan Police.
Just to, if people hadn't read this or heard about this so far, one of it was a very serious sexual assault on a child, reported to police 8 times for indecent exposure before the attack, a string of sexual offences, attempted knife-point kidnap. I mean, how on earth would that not be uncovered?
I mean, this is the question that needs to be answered. Who was the person, when they found that Wayne Cousins was not suitable to be a police officer, who decided that actually we can ignore that and we can give him a warrant card and put him out there in charge of public protection? Because I find that failure to be abhorrent, and it shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't. And the Metropolitan Police Force, just on their own, have a massive problem when it comes to confidence amongst women, that we are going to be protected on the street, in our homes, in our workplaces, and I don't see the road back to that confidence being a particularly easy one to climb.
Nigel Nelson, let's change the subject a bit. We were talking a moment ago about members of Parliament in a rather self-satisfied way, worrying about votes about Gaza. But the story this morning is that 100 Palestinians were killed in some sort of situation, crowded around a relief truck. Not clear how many of them were shot by Israeli forces, not clear how many of them died in the subsequent panic. But 100 people around a relief truck.
Well, I mean, if this is true, it's horrific. Bear in mind, this is a report from the Hamas-controlled health department in Gaza. But, I mean, we do know that an awful lot of people are being killed. The health ministry is saying that we're now over 30,000 people so far. But the point really here is it enhances what everyone seems to be trying to get towards as a ceasefire. Israel has every right to defend itself. It needs to do so proportionately, and that is what is now in question.
And that ceasefire, President Biden, when he was very inappropriately holding an ice cream, as he said it a couple of days ago, could, he said, be happening as soon as, I think, this Monday, in the next few days. That's been well set back.
Yes, I mean, the trouble is there seems to be no great appetite from the Israelis to have a ceasefire. The Netanyahu keeps talking about the fact we carry on till we win this war. Well, that is not ceasefire-type language, even though negotiations are going on in Egypt with Hamas. I mean, going back to the chaos in the House of Commons last week, we had 3 motions down which were broadly the same. There were slight differences, but there now seems to be a consensus in this country that we should head for a ceasefire. America says the same thing. Israel should listen.
OK, Nigel, thank you for now. Thank you,
Claire.
Claire. We are back with you very shortly. So much to talk about. By-elections, St David's Day, plenty still to come. Annie Shuttleworth has your weather first.